Doris Torrice. I was a physical education teacher for 10 years, and I was a counselor for 2 years. Oh gosh, Stafford was a very rural community. Um, it was, there was not a lot of industry. There was almost no industry there, here. All the shops where we used were in the city. You didn't go shop in the county. There was no place to go. There was one traffic light at Falmouth, and if you went up 17, there wasn't another one in Stafford County. If you stayed north and stayed on Route 1, the next traffic light was at the courthouse, and those were the only two lights that you had to contend with going in either direction. But it was a great, the people were just so good. They just were solid people, and the kids. You never had parents coming in outraged to the school, or rarely ever, in terms of what was going on at school. They were supportive, but they had a great deal of faith in us as teachers. Kinda, yeah. It was in 1963, and one of the things that I've always, as I've looked back on it, we integrated the high schools in 1962. When I went to Fairfax, the system wasn't integrated. They did not integrate until 1964. That I always felt like Stafford had taken that step before most systems in the state of Virginia to integrate the schools. But it was just large. I mean, it were hundreds of schools, and I went to the school that Stafford, when I left Stafford High School, was about 800, and I went to Fairfax, and it wasn't one of the larger schools I went to, but it was around 1,600. So it's the size. There was no question that there were things that Fairfax had, that money could buy, that Stafford didn't have when I was there. I mean, the supplies that we had, that teachers had to buy in Stafford for themselves. I mean, you didn't have to do that in Fairfax. But having said that, Fairfax, it was kind of, as I look back on it, even though it was a large, at the time I was there it vacillated between 120 and 125,000 students. You still kind of knew everybody. You got to, I was fortunate enough to be a guidance director between my counseling and other administrative experience. So you knew all the guidance directors, you knew all the schools, you knew a lot of people. So the structure there allowed that to happen. So even at its size, I never felt like isolated or anything. It didn't feel that large to me. I credit John Durham, who was the principal at Stafford, with that happening when it did. Mr. Durham worked with the NAACP at least a couple of years that I don't think most of us knew about, and the NAACP was trying to work toward integration of schools, and John Durham played a major role in that. No, I mean, I think it gave us, having been separate but equal situation, I think it gave us, as people who had lived for the most part the same way, it widened our knowledge of, in my case, of the black members. The kids who came to us were great, were great kids. And I think to integrate that it happened in Stafford before it happened in any of the surrounding areas, including Fairfax and Prince William. But I think in that degree it was good for all of us. Actually, Mr. Durham was my mentor. He was, I was teaching, and in the late 50s, as you know, we had Sputnik, and so the U.S. decided we had to move our kids along more, and guidance counselors were going to be a part of that. And it was in that era that I was, he encouraged me to go in my master's program and to get a major in counseling. And he was a major mentor for me. It probably influenced us, well, it definitely influenced some of the things that we put more emphasis on, such as math and science, and getting kids into, the whole program as far as counselors were concerned. We didn't have counselors as such prior to that. We didn't.
So they were.
Now there was a lady who worked with just the kids who were going to go to college to help, with that process a little bit, but not, not to the degree that the service having counselors to a greater degree and to do some other things. Well, no, every child wasn't expected. The expectation was not to go to college. One of the interesting experiences that I had along that line was during the time when I was counselor in Stafford, and my initiative, I tried to see every kid. If they didn't come see me, I sent for them. And I saw everybody at least twice a year, and those kids who sought me out, obviously more. And one of the things I attempted to do, particularly with the kids, is, well, when you finish high school, if you're not going to college, what are you going to do? And we kind of looked ahead, trying to get them to look ahead. Okay, some of them were going into the service, some of them were a variety of things. And I was working with this young black woman, and I had one of those aha moments. And I said, well, she said no, she wasn't going to college. And I said, well, what are you going to do? What are you planning to do? And she didn't have an idea. And what I had been doing with the kids, said, okay, what is it that you might consider? And I went blank, because there were not a lot of areas that this child could plan to go to do. And that was a kind of a wake-up moment, one of those for me. Well, we stumbled through it, but I don't know that I was much help. in terms of the kinds of jobs that she might plan to do. If you'll recall, working in a clothing store at that time, there were not. We had one little department store in Fredericksburg at that time, but I wasn't much help to her, to tell you the truth. She went on, though. I have seen her since then, and I think she ended up getting a job at Quantico, and I've seen her at class reunions and things since then.